Yes. That might have been on tape. We're
Yes.
here being real, raw, and related, and we're talking about magical boobs because when you have mouses that don't work, just rub it on the boob and it's all taken care of. So welcome, everybody. Who knows where today's conversation is going to go? It's me and Anna, Kendra Tanner from the True You Project. Anna, my wonderful support and person to share boob stories with. And so we came into this conversation with very little agenda, as you can see. So this is as real and raw as it gets. And the little part of the agenda that we did have is we had a question submitted to us of a topic to discuss and to really dig into and dive into. And I'm really excited for this one because I read it and I thought, oh crap, I don't have the answer. And I thought, what a great acknowledgement to understand that, sometimes we don't feel that we have all the answers, but probably there's a lot of wisdom and experiences that we can draw upon in life to still open up about and share, and potentially that can serve and help somebody where they are. And I think this really bleeds into the question as well, so I'm just going to keep going with this, but this idea of like having to have the answers and potentially not having the answers. So I just want you to hold on to that thought for a minute and how that feels for you of needing to have the answer, not having the answer, and being okay with that. And then here's the question that we're going to talk about some more, is how do you be an encouraging or understanding presence when you see someone close to you sabotaging themselves or a relationship? And just to tie it back to what we were saying about having the answers and not having the answers, I think one of the things for me is potentially recognizing that you as the observer don't have all the answers. So you're observing something and seeing something, but maybe we don't have all the answers and maybe the other person has the answers. So we went there. We'll probably go back there, but I just wanted to kind of make that connection because that was sort of how I was like, oh crap, I don't have the answer, and really, I don't have the answer for other people's lives either. It doesn't mean that we can still figure out some ways to address this and be encouraging and be supportive. So what Anna and I were thinking of doing is to start with this conversation is just to reflect for ourselves when we've been in spaces where somebody could very easily have come into our lives and said to us, hey, Kendra, you're self-sabotaging there. Looking at some behaviors that I was doing that wasn't really helpful for me, getting in my own way, potentially harmful to myself. I don't know about other people if I was harming them, but maybe knock-on effect. So we're going to answer the question of what it's like to be in the other person's shoes first, and then see where the conversation goes. And before I answer that, I just want to say that perhaps this is the first step in terms of encouraging and supporting, or maybe the second step. So the first step is acknowledging I don't have all the answers, and the second step, putting yourself in the other person's shoes. What do you think, Anna? Do you think like that works for you?
Yeah, because I mean, there has to be a certain level of empathy, might not be the right word, but you have to be able to see things from their perspective, because the way you're looking at it isn't always the way that they're seeing it.
Yeah.
So you may see somebody going through, an eating disorder and be like, oh, well, I know why you're doing this, but the reason you think they're doing it is not the reason that they're really doing it. So you kind of have to step back, be like, okay, let me step into your shoes for a moment, take a look around, and oh, light bulb. It's something entirely different. It's not, oh, you just don't like the way you look. There's something deeper, going on. sort
Yeah.
of thing. So
And
yeah,
I think
there
that
definitely has to be a
I think
um,
that is empathy. I think it's putting yourself in someone else's shoes, whether you've physically been there or you're just going to be where they are now. I'd say that that's empathy.
mhm.
That's a good word for it. All right, cool. So we've got steps 1 and steps 2. We've got I don't have all the answers, and 2, I'm going to put myself in your shoes. We're rocking this. Cool.
Yes.
Um, so I'm going to reflect just on a time, and it was eating disorder. I'll reflect on that time and think, people in my life, if they knew it was going on or if they saw it was going on or had a hunch and might not have known what to say, I'm going to have a think for myself, what would have been helpful for me at that time as the person that was self-sabotaging.
Mhm.
So, so one word that comes to mind is judgment. In the sense of that I was very wary and susceptible to other people's judgments and my own, and I would try to avoid it at all cost. So, as somebody who would have been trying to reach out to me, if they were coming with a judgment, a predetermined, like you said, Anna, like they think they know what's going on, and they're going to come in and say that off the bat, that probably would have made me shut down and run the other way. So I
Mhm.
can say, what not to do is that element of judgment. Um, I think that I think, and replacing that, what would have been a question, literally a question of just, hey Kendra, how are you? And not like, hey, how's your day? Like, how's it going? Just like this standard colloquialism in our language of, hey, how are you? But like a really like sit down and just like look me in the eyes and be like, how are you? Like, how are you really?
Mhm.
And when someone isn't coming with judgment and you can tell that it's sincere and it's from their heart and they really actually want to know and they're not going to do anything with that information, then it provides that safe space to open up. um, and so I suppose some of that goes along with trust as well, that you have some sort of rapport or relationship with them and you only you know what that looks like, but that um, you, you're building from that, and to just really turn it over to the other person and allow them to speak first before you even bring up the subject of what you think is going on with them.
Mhm. Yeah. I think, in all honesty, the simple phrase of "How are you? How are you feeling?" is probably one of the most powerful things for somebody who's struggling with anything. I mean, when it comes from a place of sincerity, because yeah, I mean, it's like everybody says, "Oh, hi, how are you?" But 9 times out of 10, they don't really care. It's just common courtesy. But that whole, somebody coming up to you and saying, "How are you? How are you feeling?" and coming from a place of, oh, they actually, give two shits about it. It's like, wow, I can actually express myself and, you know, maybe get some of this off my chest. It's a really cathartic phrase.
Yeah. So what's worked for you, or what hasn't worked for you when you've been in
Ah,
situations?
um, well, most of my self-sabotaging um has been relationship wise, really. And unfortunately, the majority of, I guess, help that I've gotten has been from the other person in the relationship, which doesn't always work as well as you think it does, because you've got that whole, well, you're biased, blah 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 thing going on. But you know it's just that whole feeling of not being good enough. You know, oh, well, I'm this, that, and the other thing. I'm coming into this relationship with, you know, 50 pounds of baggage, you know, emotional, mental, you know, there's, you know, thousands of miles between us, you know, we see each other once a year if we're lucky, you know, insecurity. And so I didn't, I'm not quite sure if I know exactly how to be happy and how to accept the fact that, oh, I might be happy.
Mm.
And so the minute I would feel that, it's like, oh, well, I have to kill this because, you know, it's not good, you know, something bad's going to happen. So I would self-sabotage and be like, oh, well, you know, this is not working, blah, 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 when it really was. But, you know, and I mean, if I look at it from an outsider perspective, what if I was able to accept that I was being given, you know, the being told that, yes, you are enough, you are what this relationship needs, you know, you can be happy. You know,
Mm.
just being told that from somebody who actually cares, you know, at the time it, you know, didn't really resonate, but looking back on it, you know, that's exactly what I needed. And,
Yeah.
you know, I still kind of do it now. But it's easier to accept the help that I'm being given, I guess.
Yeah.
You know, it's just, but knowing that it comes from a place of sincerity and love is what makes it work. Even if I'm not always willing to accept it, it's still, you know, it's one of those weird, like, I can't accept it, but it is working
Yeah. Yeah.
sort of things.
I think what you said in there that I picked up on that I want to repeat because I think it's really important is that if you mentioned sort of insecurities or that voice of I'm not enough, and so if the other person trying to come in and be supportive and encouraging, if you can be aware or have an awareness of what um, it's what the other person's going through, but it's sort of like what the record that person's playing in their head, what their pain points are, what the negative thought pattern is for them. And then potentially you're not even having a conversation about self-sabotage, but you are just supporting them to counteract what those negative thoughts are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So they may not even see you as someone who is there to help them with their self-sabotage, but you're giving them what they need without them even knowing it.
Right. It's
Yeah.
it's almost like a self-esteem boost without being like, oh, you're amazing, you're great, you know, whatever sort of buzzword, you know, is popular nowadays.
Yeah. Yeah. So when I first heard the question, one of the things that came to my mind was the the concept of rescuer and fixing. And I was thinking about the fact that if you're trying to be encouraging and supportive, but you're also trying to play the role of rescuer and fixer, that the rescuer and fixer potentially is going to come out of you a little bit more than the encourager and supporter.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think? You do great. Yeah, it sounds like you do. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think that's something as well to be aware of the of how you see yourself and the role that you're playing in the situation. You might have a desire for that person's life to look differently, but if you're trying to be the one to fix it or to rescue them from a situation, then that agenda is going to come through. And even if you're saying, like you were saying just now, Anna, like, you're great, you're amazing, you can tell if someone's doing that because they're trying to throw you a lifeline and they're saying, hold on to this life raft, I'm going to pull you back, versus, you know what, Anna, I just want you to know, like, you are absolutely amazing. And what you just did today, like, you may not see it, but that was incredible. And I don't know if you saw, but like the look in your daughter's eyes when you gave her that hug, it was like it changed her life, and I just want you to know that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and like I was saying before, I mean, it's a delicate line. You know, it's easier to be the rescuer and the fixer because it's like, okay, I got a plan. Let's do this. You know, this is what you need to do. A, B, C, D. And then you're good. But
Yeah.
you know, unless you're giving the person you're trying to help options and letting them, you know, move forward of their own volition, you know, and come at it from a place of, oh, I realize that I need to, you know, work on this problem because I see it's affecting me. You're not going to give any lasting, it's just going to be a Band-Aid.
Yeah. So how do you think you can help someone then get to that place of awareness and realization for themselves and empowerment that, oh, actually, I didn't realize I was here in this space, but it is time for me to change my life. How do you help someone get to that space without the judging, the shaming, the I know best, and all that kind of stuff?
It's actually a lot harder than you would think.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. That's why I'm throwing this out there. Let's see if we can hack into this.
If I was to use an example, there was a person that I was acquainted with. Just try to be as vague as possible. Not that anybody listening to this would know about the situation, but still. And she has a lot of personal issues. You know, she's very much unhappy with the way she looks, and you know, she has a lot of, you know, of the I'm not good enough, you know, nothing I do is good. And so my attempt to kind of help with the situation, because I can understand where she was coming from. You know, I saw a lot of the same issues in myself, you know, obviously on a different level, you know, but it was like, you know, I know how you feel, and, you know, it's okay. You know, you say you're fat, you know, your butt's too big, this, that, and the other thing. But, you know, when I look at you, I don't see any of that. Now, I understand that, you know, people look at me, you know, especially when I was a teenager, and I was, like, skinny as a stick. I mean, you remember. And people used to go, oh, I wish I looked like you. And I used to, and all I could say was, no, you don't.
Yeah.
You know, it's, you don't, because you wouldn't be happy. You know, so I know what it's like to sit, you know, to have somebody say, oh, you look fine, and still feel bad about yourself. But, you know, you can only, so my I'm like going all over the place. My kind of way to try and help was just try and be like an encouragement, you know, be like, look, you are beautiful the way you are, you know. Yes, maybe, you know, you need to exercise a little bit, you know, maybe that would help, you know, you could tone up the things that you feel flabby about, you know, exercise is always good, you know, but it never sunk in. To her, because she wasn't willing to accept it.
Yeah. I think that's a great point, and I was just thinking about that too for myself, is that if sometimes the other person, excuse me, just isn't willing or ready to accept where they're at and that they have a problem. And if I think back to when I was bulimic, for a while, I did not want to admit that I had a problem. So you could have left eating disorder pamphlets lying around the house and put signs up on the mirror that said, "You're beautiful the way you are," and or asked me, you know, "How much do you eat when you get home at night?" Or, you know, you could have like tried to intervene, and I probably would have just been like, "I don't know what you're talking about." And so I feel like there's, so what am I thinking here? As the person on the outside, if you're coming, so one thing you said there was, it goes back to that putting yourself in the other person's shoes, and I think the more related and the more connected you can get to that person and the more real, raw, and related you can be, then the greater the opportunity you have to be there for them when they are willing to accept that there's a problem and they are ready to change, because they would have seen that you would have been there the whole time.
Yeah, and I mean, and that's part of the sad thing about the situation was she pretty much self-destructed the relationship. I mean, there was a lot of other underlying issues going on, but it got to the point where it was just like, enough is enough. You know, I can't deal with, you know, being the one who is always there, being the support. Because again, I think it goes both ways. You know, especially when you are in a place of empathy where you can say, "Oh, I know exactly how you feel." You know, it goes back to the whole putting yourself in a position where you're giving and giving and giving and giving and not getting anything back. Which sort of sounds a little selfish, but you know, it's like, you know, going to a support group meeting and always being the one, you know, who's giving the encouragement and this, that, and the other thing. But the minute you try and share, everybody's like, "Oh, well, nobody cares about you."
Yeah.
You know, so, and now, you know, I got a message from her the other day, and it's like, you know, she's like, "I really wanted to apologize for the way things ended, you know, back in therapy, blah, 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 blah." And it's kind of like, that's nice. You know, are you trying to be like, "Oh, well, you know, I want, you know, my listening ear back so you can go back to being supportive"? It's like, you know, where does this go from here?
Yeah. So there's that element as well, that as the supporter and as the encourager, that you have to be, there's a question of what's the expectation around the relationship. And so if you are willing to let go of the relationship and have no expectation around it, and you're willing to be that person who's always there but potentially not receive anything in return, then that's okay. However, if you want to see that the outcome of the relationship is one where there is a bit of a give and take, then you may have to remove yourself from the role of supporter and encourager, because you won't be getting that. You won't necessarily be getting that back. So I
Right.
think that's a great thing as well to throw in there, is that if you want to be that encourager and supporter, it may be that you end up sacrificing the relationship long term to be something for them in the short term. And potentially that short, it's a choice you have to make, and depending on the dynamic and all of that, potentially the role that you play in that short term, though, may have a big impact on them later on down the road. It's just that you have to be willing not to ever get to know that or not to see that.
Yeah.
So
And
that's a great point.
yeah, I mean, and it's difficult because the whole getting to the point where you say enough is enough. It's kind of like, well, you struggle with feelings of, well, I feel like a horrible person because I'm like, you know what? I'm done. I can't deal with your crap anymore because you're obviously not willing to, deal with it, So short of taking your head and bashing it into the wall until you finally realize what's going on, it's just so, then you're like, oh, well, I could have done more, I should have, stuck it out because now I feel like I'm abandoning this person.
Mm.
But at the same time, you have to.
I think that goes back to if that role of rescuer or fixer, because if you feel that the responsibility to rescue the person to change the person is on you, then there's going to be that element of I didn't do enough, it didn't work, versus actually I'm just here to create that space and that container for that person to be able to express for themselves whatever is going on, and to eventually take the step of empowerment for themselves when they're ready and they're willing. But I have to be ready and willing to detach myself from when that actually happens for them.
And it's not always a mindset that you put yourself in, because sometimes it's the other person who looks at you and says, I need you to fix this. I need you to fix me. I need you to be my rescuer. But they're also not willing to be fixed or rescued.
Well, yeah, that's a conundrum.
Yeah. So you can go into it feeling like, I'm just going to be here. I'm going to be your support. I'm going to try and encourage you however I can. And they're like, fix me, save me. But I don't want to do any of the work.
Yeah. So there's something that's on my mind that I want to throw into the conversation, and that is that at sometimes, I think, in these situations, if we're trying to be supportive and helpful, that we are then asked to be very honest with ourselves and with the other person about what we're actually thinking and feeling and what we're seeing, and that when we are being honest, that we're doing it again from a place of love and not judgment, and also not fear that the other person might of how they would react and maybe reject us, and the expectations we have in the relationship and all that kind of stuff. You brought up a scenario where I think that is quite important, of you don't see yourself as the rescuer, the person is coming to you saying, rescue me, fix me. And so how do you then respond to that? And I think a way to that, pick your own words, but it's sort of the essence of acknowledging what they're asking. So like you're asking for help, you're asking for me to change this aspect of your life, and then asking them the question, like, why is it that you think I can change that for you, or why is it that you want that changed, and start to create a dialogue and continue to acknowledge what they're saying, continue to ask and to find out more until you've kind of got related to where they're coming from before you respond to that. But it may be that your response has to be, do you know what? Like, I love the fact that you're ready to change this part of your life, but the reality is I can't actually do that for you. You're the only person that can do it for you. And I love you and I want to see that happen for you. It's just that I'm not the person that can do it. You are. What I would love to do instead is to be able to help you, help yourself. How can I do that for you?
Mm-hmm.
And I was actually just sharing that whole sequence of acknowledging and inquiring and then responding with a woman yesterday is a really great way that we can express our truth in a situation without doing it prematurely and understanding where the other person's coming from, and also doing it from a place of connectedness and almost like cushioning and buffering what our truth is, right? Because if someone comes to you and says, hey, can you help me, and your initial response is, hey, I love you but I can't, you have to do it for yourself. It's sort of like a slap in the face, because it's like, wait, I'm asking for help, like it's the first time in my life I've done this. But if you can create that dialogue ahead of time and acknowledge that they're asking for help, ask why they're asking for help, keep acknowledging their answer, keep asking why, and then when you feel that it's right, come up with whatever your true response is. I think that can be really powerful for someone and empowering for them and for you.
Yeah, I mean, keeping that dialogue going of, how can I help? What is it that you want to fix?
Mm-hmm.
How can I help you with what you need?
Yeah.
Instead of just kind of being like, oh, well, sure, I'll help you, but I know how to.
Yeah. Right. So instead of like the yes or the no, it's like well, actually, there's a middle space in here that we could be talking about. Yeah.
Right.
It's interesting because hearing you ask those questions, I'm like, oh, you're being the coach, right? Like that's what a coach, like in a professional sense, is there for, is to ask the questions, draw out of the person what their truth is, what they're feeling, what's really going on for them. And there's actually a sort of academic model that talks about that instead of being the rescuer, you can be the coach, and you've just illustrated that perfectly. You're just asking the questions like how, why, when, all that kind of stuff, and create that dialogue. There's one other thing I just want to throw in here quickly, and then we'll wrap up. Is just that sometimes, I guess there's a huge continuum of self-sabotage. So on one end, there's a life-threatening, harmful to themselves or to other people, and then on the other end, it's like self-sabotage. I didn't send that email that really could have opened up something for me in my business. I'm going to do it tomorrow, which, okay, not the end of the world, but technically, I suppose, is self-sabotage, right? And so, probably when you're on that end, you can probably be a bit more like, dude, come on, just do it, get over yourself, right? But then when you're on the other end of the spectrum and it is life-threatening for the person or potentially other people harmful around them, I feel like that space can be even trickier because I think we were using the word before, it's like very fragile, right? Like something could go horribly wrong if it's done in the wrong way. And also sometimes you do have to step in a different way beyond the element of coach and asking questions and creating dialogue and empathy, because if somebody doesn't step in, something dramatic can happen. And so I don't necessarily have experience in that situation firsthand, and I don't necessarily feel like I have all the answers, other than I feel like whatever action you feel needs to be taken in that situation, again, if it's done from a place of love, I feel like there's less chance of it going wrong because that comes through. And so however you're expressing that it is from that place in your heart and that it's not being like, you piece of shit, why did you screw up again? I'm going to send you into the, I'm going to send you away into like the inpatient thing for help, and, like that kind of stuff. It's more of like, sometimes a person isn't able to make the decisions for themselves because they're just in such a disempowered place. And I think so long as you're stepping in for them with love and explaining that the best that you can, then it may still be hard in the moment, but I feel like later on down the road that's recognized, and reconciliation or whatever needs to happen can occur.
I think it really boils in a potential for self-harm or harm for others situation. I think it really boils down to knowing the other person, because some people don't do well with the whole let me be there for you. Some people need that whole look, this is what's going on, you need to change it, or this is going to happen, the kind of slap in the face wake up call. They may know there's an issue, but they need that like whoosh, focus sort of thing. And again, it's that tricky balance of you need to know that person, because that may be your first instinct, is to be like, look, you've got a problem, you need to fix it, or there's going to be real consequences. But that person may not respond well to that. They may need the more delicate, slow approach, whereas somebody else will need that slap in the face.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah. And you had a good point. Sometimes you need to say, I love you, but you need to have somebody else help you.
Yeah.
You need to go to counseling. You need to, spend a couple of days in inpatient care, and, get your head straight is a bad term, but, that sort of like, you need to focus on yourself and getting your head right. Again, that term, but
And there's something you said in there too that I think is important to clarify, because it's one of those words in our language that we say all the time, and sometimes you don't understand or realize the impact of it. But you said, I love you, but it's time for you to speak to a counselor, go to the hospital, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And that word but has this ingrained negation within it. And so it's almost like, I love you, but not really. I love you, but da-da-da. And so I totally understand what you're saying, and I just want to use this opportunity for people to realize if you just replace that but with an and, it's like, I love you, and because I love you, I recognize that I'm not the best person to help you right now. The best thing for you right now, from a place of love, is X, Y, Z, blah, blah. So, yeah, I feel really strongly to make that point that when you're communicating love, throw that and in there. It's because I love you, not the but.
But, right. It's just, that's like the normal train of thought. It's
totally.
Like,
totally.
This, but that.
Yep. Totally. Again, we grow up. This is how we think language. It's like, grammar class. But so, and it's like, wait a second, the damage that does without us even knowing. So,
right. And again, I mean, that situation, where you have to say, I love you, but I'm not the one to help you. And again, with the but. But I think in that situation, it's not necessarily a negatory. It's really, really dependent on the person. I mean, it happened, last month, and, it's just, it was hard. It was hard to watch it happen. But I realized that, you know, it was the right call. You know, it was what she needed to kind of, not that everything's better now, but I think it helped, you know, because she was put in a position where she was able to see, oh, she's not the only one with these issues. There are people, you know, there are other people her own age, you know, who have these same issues. You know, so as hurtful as it was for me to watch it happen and not be able to help, you know, the right call was made.
Yeah. And thank you for sharing that and getting personal about the fact that it's happened recently in your life where it was a critical situation. And I want to, what you said there at the end is so important, because I feel like this is like the missing link that we haven't talked about. But it's the fact that you may not be able to be in that other person's shoes directly. You might be able to get close, but not in the same place. But there probably are other people in this world that have been or are in those exact same shoes as the person that you want to be encouraging and supporting. And so potentially the best thing that you can do for them is put them in a situation or an environment where they are surrounded by those people, so that they do know that they're not the only one, and so that they can realize that either that there's hope because I'm not the only one, or there's hope because someone's gone before me. And also, at some stage, there's hope because I see the people behind me and now I can help them. So I'm so glad you brought that up, because I feel like that is a huge part. And when I think back to myself and what actually got me to start opening up about my bulimia was the fact that I realized I wasn't the only one, and I had a friend talk about it, and once I had one friend, then I ended up meeting another person, and all of a sudden I wasn't dealing with this on my own anymore, and so maybe I wasn't, my mom, she was very willingly saying, I'll go to support group with you, or whatever you need, or let me know, or we can talk about this. And I never really took her up on it, because even though it was a loving gesture on her part, I didn't feel like I had that. I didn't feel like she was directly in my shoes and could really understand. And so it wasn't until finding someone in my life that was directly in my shoes, and that allowed me to open up. So that's a great gift you can give someone, is to let them know, is to find other people for them. And whether that is putting them in an inpatient situation, or a counseling, or a 12-step, or whatever, or maybe it's going with them, but maybe it's just saying, hey, like, I know you're struggling with this, and I actually saw this out there, and I don't know, maybe that would be something you'd want.
And I think sometimes it's a peer thing. I mean, like you were saying with your mom, she could have known exactly what you were going through. I mean, I don't know. It could have been.
Yeah, could have. Yeah.
There's that disconnect because she's your mother, so there's an age gap. There's a, it's not the same as, say, saying finding a friend your own age who is going through the same thing or has gone through the same thing, because it's easier to relate to them.
Yeah, totally.
I can tell my kids, I know exactly how you feel, till I'm blue in the face, and they may believe me, and they may be able to relate, but it's not the same as, their peers saying, hey, I have the same issues. It's easier for them to relate to somebody their own age.
Yeah.
And I think, again, that's something you can do to kind of help if there is something with an age gap.
Yeah. Cool. Anna, this has been an awesome conversation, and I hope for people listening, I'd love to hear I'm just looking at the time, sorry, that's why I'm bending over and you're seeing close-up of my left side of my face. But if you're listening, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, and also, I'm going to say, this is not an exhaustive list, but this is what has been real for Anna and myself in our own lives. So if you're listening and you have other things that have worked for you or things that haven't worked for you, I invite you to leave a comment below this video, because I think it's one of those, it's a great question that I think lots of people are asking, and let's support each other from our own experiences. So you're all invited to that as you're watching this. I think we're going to wrap up now, just so this doesn't go on for too long. Is there anything else you want to throw in there, Anna?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think I kind of like, it's definitely a really good conversation, and again, a really tricky situation to find yourself in, and finding that balance.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think that's really the key. Knowing the other person and finding that balance between, you know, being supportive and not crossing the I'm going to fix you drill sergeant.
Yeah. Yeah, and just to recap what we talked about, and I'll probably summarize it below so you can kind of have your 7-step plan or whatever, however many steps it is, but it's admitting that you don't have all the answers. We talked about putting yourself in the other person's shoes, being sensitive to what the other person is going through, and being able to support that and encourage or counteract that without even having to say that that's what you're doing. It's asking the question, just how are you feeling and how are you really feeling, and creating that space and holding that space to do that. And I'm going to put a link to a great article I read recently about holding that space and creating that safe container for someone. And then we talked about giving, having everything coming from a place of sincerity and love, and that if you're giving a self-esteem boost, you're doing it from that place, not just as like a washover or here's a lifeline. And then we also talked about sometimes being the person to step in to be that bridge between the person and other people who are going through the same things, so that they know they're not the only one, and putting them in a different environment, or offering them a different environment that is going to empower them beyond what you personally are able to do. So I hope that leaves you with something to think about and some encouragement if you're dealing with this for yourself. And yeah, let us know in the comments. Anna, thanks for being here. This has been great. And we'll be talking soon.